morning and thank you for stopping by to spend some time with me today here on the couch. I've got a different kind of show for you this morning. To this point, our videos have been song tutorials and practical application guitar lessons. One of the most common questions that I've had as a guitar repair tech, a guitar dealer, and now as a teacher of sorts is about strings. How often should I change my strings? How does one go about changing their strings, and what type of strings should I use? Today I'm going to try to answer those questions and more. So let's jump right in. Use my couch as a dual purpose workbench here today. If you do use a workbench, you want to lay down a towel or something soft so the guitar doesn't get scratched up, obviously. And I'll also start by saying that the only thing that you really have to change strings is a new set of strings. Now I've got some other tools and things here that will help make the job a little bit easier. I'm going to be using one of these, which is a combination string winder that fits over the tuning peg and helps you crank the strings a little bit faster. It also has a built-in clipper here. This is a Diodario brand. There are different brands that you can get. I've got an old t-shirt that I've cut into rags that I'm going to use to clean the guitar a little bit once we get the strings off it. I've got a guitar polish and cleaner. This one's made by Dunlop. There's lots of different brands. This is one that I like. I've got some oil to hydrate the fretboard. There are also lots of different kinds of oils that people use to put on the fretboard to keep that from drying out. One of the things that people use a lot are lemon oil. I will say that I've heard that lemon oil over time will dry out the fretboard worse. So I don't use that specifically. This is a polish that just says 100% natural oils, petroleum and wax free. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's not lemon oil specifically. And then I also have this, which is a lubricant for the nut. So the area where the strings lay across there, this will help prevent the strings from getting bound up and even broken. Will help them slide more freely when we're playing guitar after we get the strings changed. So the first thing that we need to do is to cut the strings. But before I do that, I'm going to wind them down a little bit. I'm going to take the tension off the strings so that they don't fly up and hit us or cause any damage. Just taking tension off each string a little bit to where they're kind of nice and loose and floppy. One of the questions I hear a lot is, how do I know when it's time to change my strings? So for me, it's a visual thing. Also a little bit of a sound thing, because you can tell a difference when the strings are starting to become corroded and they're starting to make a dead sound instead of a nice ringing, chiming sound. But for me, the biggest one is I can see where the string is kind of breaking down, whether the string's corroding or whether this is just dirt from my fingers and oils that gets built up on the strings. Once I start seeing this, that is when I know it's time to change my strings. As far as the frequency, it's really going to depend more on how often you play or how much you play. Professionals that use their instruments every night and they want as clean and as good a sound as they can get, frequently they'll change them, maybe even every night, but multiple times per week. I usually about once a month, at least, sometimes a little more frequently than that if I'm playing a lot. If I'm playing a couple hours a day, which I sometimes do, I might change it as much as every 3 weeks. But once I start seeing these little dark patches, in my mind, I know it's time to change it. As far as what kind of strings are the best, that's personal preference. Obviously, there are lots of different brands. Personally, I really like Elixir strings. I've used all kinds of different brands over the years. I've been playing for more than 40 years. I've been a guitar repair technician professionally. I've been even a luthier, a builder. I've built guitars and done repair and maintenance on guitars professionally. And over the past, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so, I've been using elixirs almost exclusively. It's not to say I won't try a different brand once in a while, and there is a new brand that's come out here lately that's an American-made string that I'm going to try here in the future on my electric guitar, so that might be a different video. But elixirs, to me, they're a coated string. They feel much smoother, they sound a little brighter, and they also last much longer. Might be a little bit more expensive than your typical cheapo brand, but you're not going to get corroded strings. They're going to last substantially longer, and to me they feel and sound better as well. So once we get our strings, I open the package. I always kind of turn them over because I start with the low E string, so I make sure they're in the right order. The gauge that you use is also a personal preference. Most acoustic guitars come with light gauge strings, which are usually going to be like a 10 to 52, or even a 12 to 52 actually on acoustics. 10 more on electrics, be like a 10 to 46. This is a custom light. It's an 11 to 52, so it's a little bit lighter than your average light acoustic string, which to me is fine. Some people will argue that a heavier gauge string is going to provide more volume. I don't agree with that. I think the guitar is just as loud with light or extra light strings as it is with heavy strings. I think that it's easier to keep the action or the string height manageable with lighter strings. And I think it's much easier to play and to bend notes and do things like that. Some of the techniques that we use in playing are going to be easier with light or extra light strings. That's why I use these. So the next thing that we want to do is simply to clip the strings. And I usually find that right here, just past the nut at the headstock is going to be the easiest place to do that. I just want to be careful not to nick the headstock, to scratch it. And I go through and I clip them all at the same time. Different people do this in different ways. This is how I do it, and this is what I think works best for me. So once they are all cut, you've got these strings hanging loose. The next thing that we want to do is remove the bridge pins. And most of these little tools have little notches in the back, and those notches are to fit underneath the bridge pins to give you some leverage to pull it up like that. An important thing to remember when you're changing strings is to try to keep the bridge pins in the order that they came out, because the holes in the bridge of the guitar tend to, the pins get seated in there and they tend to wear the way they are. So to prevent any future issues, I always try to put the pins back in the holes that they came out of. So there's a little slot in the front of the hole that's going to point forward. It's going to point towards the headstock of the guitar. For now, I'm going to lay these all down, and I'm going to lay them down in the order that they came out. Just pop them out one at a time. Once in a while, you'll get one that's a little stubborn and doesn't want to come out. If that's the case, if you can't get underneath it or whatever, you can always reach inside and push up on the pin from underneath. Sometimes if you have a stubborn one, it's a little bit easier to get it out that way. Once you have all the pins out, these will just lift right out of the holes. Usually, sometimes on an older guitar, they'll be like, sometimes there's little grooves worn in the bridge and they're stuck in that, and you have to jimmy them out a little bit. But once I get all these out, I make sure that I have all 6 in my hand and I wrap them up to throw them away shortly. The reason being is because if you drop one of these strings, sometimes the thinner strings especially, they're hard to see, and the ends of these and the ends up here on the headstock especially are like acupuncture needles in your foot. So you want to be very careful that you don't drop it. I've got all 6 strings, and I've got all 6 of the remnants up here from the headstock. I throw all that stuff away together. Don't leave anything on the floor. Don't leave anything to sit down on or to step on. And also, when you're pulling these off, be careful that you don't poke yourself in the finger, because that's a pretty common thing too, and I can tell you from experience, they hurt. So I'm careful not to scratch the headstock as I pull these out. Just kind of unwind them. Sit them all on your bench or your couch or whatever you're using together in a little pile. And we want to make sure that we have all 6 when we're done. 1, 2, 3. We've got 3 there, 4, 5, 6. Got all 6 of those. I've got my wrapped up strings. I'm going to go throw them away before I lose them. So now that we have the strings off the guitar, it's a good time to do a little preventative maintenance and to do a little bit of cleanup. There's always the dust and the grit that gets under the strings in this area that's hard to get to with the strings on the guitar. Headstock's hard to clean with the strings on the guitar. We want to condition the fretboard and maybe even the bridge. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the saddle out of the bridge, and with most guitars they just sit there. They're only held in place by the tension of the strings. So that will just lift right out, and it's very important to get it back in the same manner that it came out. So I'm going to sit that back there by the bridge pins. I'm going to lay it down the way that it came out, and then I'm going to do a little cleaning. We'll use our cloth and a little bit of this spray polish cleaner. I'll give the entire body a couple of squirts of that. And just use my cotton t-shirt here. I know it's not going to scratch. I know it's clean. It doesn't have any dirt or grit in it. I'm going to do just a little wipe down and polish, especially in this area right here that's under the strings. I can always do the side and the backs later if that needs done without strings. If you want to do it right now, well, you're doing it anyway, so you don't forget later, you don't start doing something else and not get back to it. That's fine. It's a decent time to do it. The headstock here, you always get some grit that builds up on the surface of the face there of the headstock. It's usually under the strings you can't get to. So try to wipe all that down good. If I have any tuners that happen to be loose that need tightened down, I always kind of check those right now too. If I've got any maintenance that I can do with those, this is a good time to do it when there's no tension on the strings. I'm going to take my fretboard oil, whatever kind we're using, and I just want to put a little bit on the corner of the rag. In case I were to use this rag again, I'm just going to put a little dab here. It doesn't take much, especially this brand anyway. Different brands are different. I'm just going to rub that in between each fret. I don't want to get too much because I'm going to wipe off the excess when I'm done anyway. If you see any grit or junk, sometimes when we're shredding, right, they call it shredding because you're shredding little pieces of skin off the tips of your fingers. Sometimes those will get stuck in there with the frets. I just use the rag and just the corner of my fingernail to dig any of that stuff out from under the fret if you see some. You can also use a toothpick. It's not going to scratch or cause any damage. There's a little applicator that was up in the tip that makes it easier, doesn't it? That's fun. I'm just going to put that all over the entire fretboard, get a good coating on there. And we'll let it sit for a little bit and dry. And while it's drying, probably put a little little coating here on the bridge as well, because this is the exact same material. They're usually either rosewood or ebony, depending on the guitar and the materials used. Usually your bridge and your fretboard the exact same material, and if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander, right? So I do that, and then I also kind of get in here. You can see like some junk usually gets stuck in there, like right along the edge of the body and the bridge. So I'll try to clean that out as best I can while I've got the guitar in this condition with no strings on it. It makes it a little bit easier. And then too, if you get any of that oil on the surface of the guitar top, you want to kind of wipe that off too, so it's not just sitting there on the finish. Not that it's going to hurt it, it's just going to, you know, look goofy like you spilt something on there. After the fretboard is dried a little bit, and this one's not in bad shape, so it doesn't take very long. Sometimes older guitars are like super dry, and you can put coat after coat on, and it takes them a while to drink it all in. Every time I change strings, I condition the fretboard, hydrate it a little bit, so it's not so much an issue with my guitars. But if you're working on an older guitar for somebody, or if you have an older guitar that you've not changed the strings very often, you want to spend a little bit more time there on the fretboard, making sure it's nice and hydrated and clean. See, one more little dry spot here. Try to rub some in. And you don't want a ton of excess, so it's not a big deal. If it's a little bit, don't worry about it, but you don't want it like dripping off the sides or anything like that. So you just want to make sure it's well rubbed into the wood. Now, putting the new strings on. So I'm going to start with thickest string, the low E string, which is going to be on this side of the guitar. I'm going to do the 3 strings on this side of the guitar, then I'm going to flip the guitar over to make it easier to do the other side. Let me show you how this goes. Take our first string, and at the ends of guitar strings there are these little balls that help to hold them in place. Those little balls should not be like this inside the bridge. They should be like this, and hopefully you can see that. So if the ball were a wheel, it is running in the same direction as my fretboard, as the neck of the guitar. We don't want it perpendicular to, we want it parallel with. And then once we put it into the hole, this little slot is going to fit over the string. I can hold them together there, and it will pull up to the underside of the guitar, and it should fit in there just like that. We don't want the ball held in place at the end of the pin like that in the guitar. We want the ball up like right under the top and held in place like this. So put the ball in. I need to put my saddle back in before I forget that. Put the ball in perpendicular with the fretboard. You can push it down with the bottom, but then you want to kind of wiggle it into place to where now you can see the edge of the string winding pop up through the hole. And I'm also, just to check that I have it right, I'm going to reach up in there and I can feel that that ball is right up against the bottom of the bridge, held in place by the pin. Then I'm going to stretch the string down this way. I'm going to go past, this is the way I do it. I know different people have different methods, but this works good for me, so I would assume it'll work good for you too. So I'll go past the tuner that I want to the next tuner. I'll use that second tuner as a pivot point to bend it, and I put a little bend in the string right there. And when I cut the string, I want to cut it a little bit, maybe an inch at most, 3/4 of an inch past that bend. Somewhere in that neighborhood. I don't want to cut it too short. I also don't want to leave it hanging too long. Again, put all your pieces in one place so you don't lose them, because that is a dangerous weapon to your foot if you step on it at night getting out of bed, or in this case getting off the couch. I'm going to put this through the string, or through the tuner, through this peg, and usually I'll try to tune this to get it like into place to make that easily to do first. And then I bend it down tight. And something to remember when you wind strings is, on this kind of guitar anyway, 6 tuners on one side, you want to go on the inside of the tuner out, and then it's going to wrap around this way counterclockwise. So I've got it through the hole, I've got it right up to the pivot point there. I'm going to bend it backwards just a little bit to help hold it into place. And I'm going to lift up and I'm going to turn it. And as we turn it, another thing to be careful of, you don't want this end to dig into the peg face on the headstock, because it will scratch it. It'll make a perfectly circular scratch as you go around. So I want that pointed up a little bit. The very first one, I'm going to go over the top. So it's going over the top of our little tail that we left there. All the other ones are going to go underneath the tail, and that will help to hold the string in place good. Crank it down once there starts to get a little tension on it. I'm also going to push down on my bridge pin a little bit. A lot of times you'll hear those starting to pull up. The tension of the string starts pulling it back out. So make sure it's all the way down. And I'm not really going to tune it all the way up to pitch like with a tuner at this point, because it's going to change anyway. I just want to get it somewhere in the right neighborhood, and then I move on to my next string. And I just thought of one more tool that will help you, so I'm going to go get that. So the tool I went and grabbed is not something I bought at the store, but something that I made myself. It's a little neck stand, and there are companies, Diodario makes a professional one of these to help hold the neck up off of your work surface to make it easier to turn the tuners. This is just one that I made myself with some wood. I screwed it all together, glued it all together, glued a piece of felt in there to where it wouldn't scratch the back of the neck. And that works just fine for me. So we go on to the second string. And do exactly the same thing. Try to be careful to get the right bridge pins, and also to get the ball in the right direction, and pull the ball up to the top of the underside of the guitar top. Again, I go past the tuner that I need to the next one, and I bend it. Once I have my bend, cut it off a little bit past the bend, string in the same place, come through the hole, bend it up away from the way I'm tuning, and turn it counterclockwise so the string goes over the top. Again, the first one, I go over the string. Every other one, I'm going to go under the tail, I mean. Cut that one a little bit long. Longer is better than short. A mistake that people make changing their strings is that they'll cut these too short initially, or maybe even right after they change them, and then as you're trying to tighten them, as the strings come out of tune, they'll slide through and they'll pop out, and then you're kind of in trouble because you have to pull it out, start over, and try again, and usually winds up just having to go and get another string. Okay, so now we're at our third tuner on this side. So the question is, what do we do? Because we don't have a fourth tuner to go up and wrap it around. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend like there is another tuner up there. So at about the spot where that tuner would be, if there was one there, so it would be roughly in that area. So I'm just going to bend the string there as if there were another tuner. Make my cut just like before. over the top, all the rest underneath. I've seen people do all kinds of goofy things to put the strings in the tuners, tying like crazy Boy Scout or fishing knots and stuff to make it almost impossible to get them out later when you change the strings. If you do it this way, first one over the tail, all the rest wind under the tail, it'll hold itself in place every time and it comes out real easy when you go to change them. You can hear that pin trying to pull up a little bit, so again, just give them a little push. Make sure they're all in there good. Now it's time that we flip the guitar over and we'll do the other. So I flipped the guitar around, made some adjustments on where everything was laying to make it easier to get to. One thing that we forgot on these first 3 strings, and I can always take the tension off, lift them out, and do that, but was to put the nut lubricant in. So I'm going to do that now, and it just takes a little bit. This particular brand, which is Music Nomad, Tune It is the name brand. It comes with these 2 little applicator brushes, some big ones for the bigger spots and a little one for the smaller slots. We just want a little tiny bit. We're going to put it right in the slot as much as we can. Kind of turn it to where it comes off the brush. There's a little tiny brush there. We're just putting it in those slots. Before I tune it up, I'll let the tension off the other 3 to put some in those slots as well. I'm also real conscientious about using this every time I change strings, so if you forget a time or if you miss a couple one time, it's not going to be that big a deal. Really what it does is it just allows the strings to travel real freely within those slots without getting jammed up. Sometimes you'll be tuning or even playing, like bending a string, and the string will get caught in these slots if there's no lubrication in there. Not that you have to have it. Some people have probably never used it and never had a problem, but this just prevents problems, so it's a good idea to use it if you have it available to you. Another thing that I've seen people do and that it works, graphite is usually one of the items in that lubricant, so you can even take a real sharp pencil lead and put a little graphite in there and just get it. You don't want it all over the guitar, obviously, but you just want to get it as much as you can into the slots to help lubricate for that purpose. I wouldn't do that as a rule, more as an exception. So now we're getting down to the thinner strings. We're getting to where we have less room to reach our arm up inside if we have to. So we want to be a little more careful. Another thing to keep in mind is that I flipped the guitar, but the bridge pins are probably still laying exactly as they were. So I want to be careful to get the right one. If the guitar were facing the other way, I would keep going from the outside in, so that is the same one that I want to use now. This is going to be the next one. Just make sure you get the next one in line from what you were doing is what I'm trying to say, I guess. Fits in real well. This is the 3rd one again, so I'm going to go past it about a length of where a tuner should be. I'm going to bend it and cut it off just like the rest. Put it through the hole right at the bend. I'm going to bend it away from us a little bit. Again, we're tuning counterclockwise, but what we want to do is make sure that the string's going up the inside and over the top as it winds. So our first one, I guess I didn't show you, but the first one went over the tail, making sure I had it right there. And every other one's going to go under the tail. And you might need to, I'm not pushing the string against the headstock face, against the peg face, but I am pushing it down and holding it there with my finger. This is kind of the position so I've got some tension on both ends as I'm turning it. Now, if you don't have something like this or a professional model, you also have to like hold the guitar up like this while you do it, which is just an extra step, and that's why this helps. Makes it easier to handle. Real hard to get your fingers up in there now. So just making sure that the ball is up against the bottom, which it is. Pass the one I want to the next one and bend it. As these strings get thinner, they also get harder to see. That's why it's important to put them all in the right place, count them, make sure that you have 6 and you don't leave any to be found later in your bare feet. First one over the top, the rest underneath. B string, and last one, our high E. You can kind of jimmy them around and feel, because there's no way to get my hand in there now, so you can jimmy them around and feel when that ball is in the right position. Okay, all the strings are on. We've got one last important step that's probably going to take almost as long as everything did to this point. A lot of people either don't do it, don't know about it, don't think about it, forget it. This is probably the most important thing, maybe in my opinion. So I'm going to switch some things around. I'm going to throw some things away. We'll come right back and take care of the last step. Okay, so the last thing that we want to do, a thing that a lot of people either don't do or forget about doing or don't think about doing or don't know that they should do, is to stretch the strings. If you've ever put a new set of strings on and you notice that for a week or more you have to constantly keep retuning the string, that it keeps coming out of tune, losing pitch, that's because the strings were not stretched. If you stretch them properly, you will not have that issue. So the first thing that we'll do is we've got a tuner here and we want to tune the strings to pitch. E, A. They don't have to be exact here because they're going to come out anyway. If you hear the pins popping as you're tuning them tighter, you can always push down, make sure they're still in place. And both of those pretty close. So now that we've got them in tune, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to stretch each string individually. And I start by holding down on the pin, and I'm going to lift up right in the middle. I'm just going to give it a good stretch. Now, I don't want to put so much pressure on there that I break the string or break the neck or break anything. I'm just pulling up until it gives me some pretty firm tension. I mean, I could probably pull it a lot farther, but that's not my goal here. Once I do that, I'm going to go all along the string and just kind of use my fingers to work it and bend it against itself. So again, we're not doing enough to cause damage. We're not trying to pull the bridge off the body. We're not trying to break the string. We're not trying to cause the neck to bow. All we're doing is stretching the string to get that worked out. Now, I'll do this part first on each string. I guess it doesn't matter how you do it as long as you remember to do it. Holding down the bridge pin so I don't pop any out, because you can doing this part. So I have each string pulled up in the middle. I'll go down the line like this. Just work each one against itself. And you'll be surprised just how out of tune, or you might not be, each one of these strings will be when we check them with the tuner. We're going to tune them back into pitch. We're going to stretch them again, tune them back in this pitch, stretch them a third time. By the third time, after we stretch them and then tune them to pitch, they should be good, or pretty darn close to good. Okay, so our E string is all the way down. Doesn't have to be exactly perfect here because it's going to keep coming out. Another thing to remember, on the last time that we tune them up, you want to pull the string into pitch going up, not going down. So if we've gone past it, we don't want to go back down to the note. We want to come up to the note. So if you accidentally go past it, go back down below it and then tune up to the note, and it will stay in tune better that way as well. Go back through. I'm going to do each string again, just like we did the first time. This time, the strings are going to be out of tune, but not as bad as the first time. So it's still almost an E. One last time. So now, after the third time, they may not be out of tune at all. If they are, it'll be a very small amount. that should do it. Now let's try that same passage as we played before and see if we can tell a difference. Can you tell the difference? I know I can. I will be posting affiliate links in the description. If you are in need of a set of elixir strings, or if you would like to try any of the products I used in this video, I will post links only for those which can be purchased directly from the manufacturer's store on Amazon. If you use those links to complete a transaction, I will receive a small affiliate commission, and I would be very grateful for your support in that way. If this video has been helpful or entertaining, I'll ask that you give me a thumbs up down below. Subscribe if you would like to see more content from me. And as always, I would encourage you to pick Jesus. I can't wait to see you guys again soon, right back here on the couch.